Mr. Jeon and a man in a black dress were talking to each other outside of the party area. The black dressed man said in a deep voice, sending shiver down on Mr. Jeon's spine. Mr. Jeon said while calming himself. The man nodded and left him alone in the area. Suddenly, Mr. Jeon heard movement behind him and he turned around immediately. There were bushes. He went near them and looked all over the area while sweating. He shook his head and headed to the party area. Wang got a notification from unknown number. Her eyes frowned as she glanced at her phone. She mumbled under her breath and unlocked her phone. Wine was about to open the message when someone snatched her phone. She flinched and glared at the person. It was Jungkook who was glaring at her. Wine rolled her eyes and stood up to take her phone back. He said with a smirk on his lips. She answered with a dark gaze. Jungkook challenged her and waited for Vian's next step. Vian jumped a little to grab her phone. She sighed as she gave up. She said angrily and left him alone unsatisfied. Jungkook clenched his jaw and glared at Sobin who was coming towards him. Jungkook rolled his eyes and was about to go. Sobin mocked him. Jungkook gave him a warning with an icy gaze. Sobin sarcastically laughed, causing Jungkook to close his eyes in anger. Jungkook stopped as he saw his father near him. He let out a pissed off sigh and left Sobin. Sobin chuckled and shook his head in satisfaction. Vine came out of the party to get some fresh air. Her eyes widened when she saw a girl pointed a gun at her. A gas escaped out of her mouth when the girl hit the trigger of the gun. Vine closed her eyes and suddenly a powerful jerk pulled her close to a muscular chest. Vine hugged the person. He was panting heavily. She broke the hug as she came back to reality. Vine turned her gaze to the person who was staring at her worriedly. Jungkook asked, breathing heavily, causing her to nod. His gaze turned into a scary one when Jungkook glanced at the girl, who was trembling in fear. She was about to run, but Jungkook was fast enough to grasp her arm and pull her back. He yelled at her, causing her to faint. At the hospital, after a short treatment of the girl, Vian and Jungkook were waiting for her to wake up. Jungkook was taking glances from time to time at Vian if she was fine or not. She was sitting with a numb body in a shock, which happened 2 hours ago. Jungkook sighed and stood next to her with a worried gaze. He patted her head, causing her to burst into tears. She was sobbing harder, making Jungkook's gaze soften. He rubbed her head and Vian hugged his waist tightly. Vian managed to say that in her sobs, Jungkook gently rubbed her head to calm her down. He bent down on his knees and smiled before saying. She nodded at him. Jungkook steadied and left to take water for her. Jungkook was taking a water bottle for Wyan when his gaze landed on his father figure, who was sweating badly while talking to someone. Jungkook frowned after seeing him in a such condition. He mumbled and was about to follow him but stopped as the doctor called him. Jungkook nodded and followed the doctor. Jungkook and Wyan entered the ward. The girl was resting her head on the bed. She flinched as her eyes met with Jungkook's dark one. She shuddered in fear. Jungkook threatened her. The girl nodded her head multiple times and Wyan sat on the chair with the help of Jungkook as she was in pain in her foot. She sat in her breath, casting them eyes to widen. Wyan whispered under her breath. The girl was about to answer but was stopped as the door wide opened, revealing Mr. June. The girl's eyes widened in shock, seeing him in front of her. Everyone diverted their attention to Mr. June, who was panting heavily. Jungkook mumbled. Mr. June pointed his index finger at the girl. Wyan flinched and Jungkook in a shock because his father suddenly outburst. The police dragged her with them out of the hospital, casing Wyan and Jungkook to follow them. The girl was trying to escape out of their grip, glancing at Wyan hopelessly. Wyan ran to her and glared at the police, making them to leave the girl. The girl was about to say something but stopped when Mr. Jun showed her a picture of her kid from behind. The girl said as she nodded to the police to take her with them. Wyan quickly took a glance in Mr. Jun's direction, who was smirking creepily. Wyan threw her phone on the bed and headed to the closet. She took her comfortable dress and stepped into the bathroom. After taking a long warm shower, she came out and dried her hair. Wyan applied moisturizer lotion and made her way to the bed. She let out a tired sigh and took her phone. Suddenly something hit on her mind. She opened the messages of her manager, narrowed her eyes, and opened the video. Wyan's eyes widened as she saw all the videos which her manager sent her. Wyan sat and remembered something that the girl said to her when the police were taking her to the jail. Wyan got off the bed and went to her wardrobe. She took her laptop and made her way to the table. She placed it on the table and turned it on. Wyan opened the file which she copied from the pen drive. All the evidence she got in the past few days, she started checking. Wyan was focused on her work and suddenly her phone rang, catching her attention. She glanced at the caller ID and picked it up. It was Sobin on the other side. Wyan smiled as she heard his worried voice. She replied calmly. Wyan's eyes widened while glancing at the screen of the laptop, causing Sobin to shock.